Hi, I'm Dr. Christine Hanlon from the University of Central Florida, here to talk to you about the Elaboration Likelihood Model, or what we like to lovingly refer to as the ELM. So the Elaboration Likelihood Model, that's a huge mouthful. It was developed by Patty and Capiocho back in the 1980s. But let's break this down because otherwise it's just wordy, it's big. The Elaboration Likelihood Model. So elaboration, what does that mean? Basically it means the likelihood that you're going to think about something, right? So likelihood meaning whether or not you're going to do it, right? The likeliness. And elaboration meaning thinking. So really it should be just called the thinking model. It'd be so much easier. The Elaboration Likelihood Model. The likelihood that you're going to think about information that somebody sends to you as a sender, as a source, right? So will the receiver process the information? And how well will they do that? And that's exactly what the Elaboration Likelihood Model looks at. So with the Elaboration Likelihood Model, there are two routes to the Elaboration Likelihood Model. There's the peripheral route and there's the central route. So we've got two routes, central route and we've got peripheral route. Now let's define those. So the central route is when you are really focused on the message. When you're like, I'm going to analyze this, I'm going to deeply think about it, and I'm going to focus on just this message. Very rarely are we 100% in the central route. We may have the intention of being 100% in the central route, right? But not always are we 100% in the central route. So with the central route, we may have the intention of being in the central route and focusing on a class. And we sit down in class and we're like, yes, I've got my note-taking materials ready. I am ready to go. I am amped for this class and I'm gonna listen. But then the person next to you is doing something that's distracting you. And that's pulling you away from the central route. Or maybe you have some internal psychological noise going on, right? So if you have a personal problem, you just left your apartment and your roommate and you had kind of a little argument and you're thinking, oh, when I get back there, I'm going to say this and I'm going to do that. And I don't know about you all, but my best comebacks come like an hour later and I'm like, oh, wait till I see them again because I have it like organized and ready to go. But at the time, I'm like, my message is not coming out the way it should be. So central route, it's hard to stay in the central route and focus on that information when you're in class because you've got all of these other things going on. You've got the external noise of the person sitting next to you. You've got the internal psychological noise inside your head, and it's hard to focus 100% on one message because you've got so many other things going on. So central route, ideal. Wouldn't it be great if we could all be in the central route all of the time? It'd be fantastic. Doesn't happen. You might be putting a really great effort in there and dismissing those thoughts and dismissing that person next to you and trying to focus, but you're still going to be like 90%. You're not going to be 100%, okay? Because you've got these other things that are pulling you away. So central route, ideal. People are processing your message. They're thinking and they're analyzing about your message. And that is the ideal way that we want our audiences to be. We want them to be in the central route because the central route is where they're focused on the message. And the message, according to the SMCRE model, is the part that we have the most control over. So yes, we want our audiences to be right here in the central route. But then we've got the peripheral route. And the peripheral route, oh no. Peripheral route is when we think about anything other than the message. So anything that's not the message is the peripheral route. So if you're looking at somebody's clothes, you're looking at their glasses, you're thinking about the person next to you, you're thinking about what happened in your apartment earlier that day, anything else that is distracting you from the message is pulling you into the peripheral route. So it's a constant kind of pull. And because they name these routes, it kind of has a feeling like it's a choice. Like you're either in peripheral or you're in central, but it's not like that. I really wish they wouldn't have used the word route because it has that connotation to it. So when you're thinking about the central route and the peripheral route, I want you to think about it more like a continuum rather than, two roads diverged in the forest and we chose the one less traveled by. You know what I'm saying? It's not an either or situation. It's more of a continuum. And we're either in the middle or maybe we're pulled over here and we're not listening to the message at all if we're completely in the peripheral route. Or maybe we're really trying hard We're really trying hard, but quite frankly, in one single class meeting, in one single interaction, you're not in one place or the other. You're constantly moving. It's a constant influx kind of a deal. Where you're moving, you might be like, my intention is to be in central route. I really want to listen to you, and you're trying to be in the central route, but you're being pulled constantly into that peripheral route, and it's a constant struggle of going back and forth. So one of the tricks that teachers often do, they'll see their students start to kind of wane a little bit, and you can tell they're not listening as intently as they were in the beginning of class. So they'll do something really cheap, and they'll be like, it's on the test. And all of a sudden, everybody's sitting up a little bit more straight and paying a little bit more attention. You're pulling them from that peripheral route to the central route. So there are certain things that we can do as speakers to keep people in the central route. So let's talk about that. There are two things that will help you keep people central route oriented. The first thing is motivation. That's that cheap teacher trick, right? It's on the test. It motivates people to get back over here and focus and pay attention. But you have to give your audience motivation. And that's kind of hard sometimes, because how do you motivate an audience if you're not giving them a test after your presentation or after your interaction? So you have to give them other forms of motivation. You have to think about why this information is relevant to them, why they should care about it. And you always want to give people a reason to listen to you. And especially with American audiences, we're individualistic. We want to know what we're getting out of it. What am I getting? You know, I have to get something. And so you need to be very explicit and tell us, this is what you're going to get. This is how you're going to benefit. And that will keep people more in the central route, right? So motivation is a huge thing. The other thing is ability. If we don't have the ability to process your message, we're not going to be able to do it. And the less ability we have, the more we're going to be in that peripheral route. The more difficult your message is to process, the more we're going to be in the peripheral route. So you want to make sure that your messages are easier to process. So ability is really important. And sometimes people go straight to language. They're like, oh, well, that has to do, you know, I have this professor who has a really thick accent and they're difficult to hear. And so sometimes I get pulled into that peripheral route a little bit faster because it's so hard to process the message. I really have to pay attention. And that does have to do with ability. But with ability, what we're really talking about more so than that is about the language that you use. So how do you tailor your audience or your message for your audience? How do you tailor that message? How do you think about what language you're using? I always use very conversational language when I'm teaching concepts, because I don't want to speak above people's heads. I don't want to be using GRE words, because that's not going to help them process the message. I want to use simple language so people can understand the concepts. Like this elaboration likelihood model. It sounds so fancy and like, oh, it's so difficult to this is easy stuff. This is easy stuff. But sometimes we just make things more difficult, and it makes it more difficult for people to process and understand the message. Keep the language simple. Okay, keep it simple. And think about your audience too. Make sure that the language is appropriate for your audience. Obviously, we're going to speak differently to college students than we are to middle school students, right? So you want to think about what types of language you're using, and are you giving your audience the best options in terms of ability to understand your message. So that's about, as a speaker, am I choosing appropriate language and an appropriate kind of a technique in terms of how I'm delivering that message. So motivation and ability, two important things. Keep your audience in the central route. That's where you have the most control. You have control over the message as a speaker. So you want your audience to be here, central route oriented. You do not want them thinking about your shoes or anybody else in the room or their family relationships. You want them over here. So do everything you can to increase their motivation, to increase their ability, and you will keep them more centrally route oriented. And you'll become a more effective presenter. You'll become a more effective communicator. So elaboration likelihood model, not that difficult to understand. We refer to it as the ELM throughout the course. So make sure that you understand these concepts, and hopefully you get an A on the test and you'll become a more effective communicator.